Right now we'll move to our speakers list. There are no materials for this. The first speaker is a 10-minute speaker, and it's Al King. And you come forward, and whenever you're ready, you may begin. Mr. King.
So is this one working? Yeah. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be addressing you. And I'll just say it's humbling for me to just be reminded again of the extraordinary degree of expertise that just lurks in my neighborhood. It's just remarkable. So much so that I've scribbled notes here about things I'd no point in me saying. They've been presented wonderfully so far. My name is Lauren King. I grew up in Hamilton. I'm a professor now at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo. My wife is a professor at McMaster, and we live in West Hill and have for about 7 years now. We have 3 children, 2 of whom attend GR Allen. My academic background is a little different than my friends and fellow residents. I'm a philosopher. I study problems of justice and democracy, and I focus on those problems in cities. I also, though, have a background in computational and statistical and mathematical approaches in the social sciences. I'm very interested in game theory, for instance, and statistical analysis. It's a strange combination. You might think it's useful only for making me doubly boring at dinner parties. That would be true. It does, though, help me ferret out certain hidden assumptions and complexities behind the kind of numbers that get tossed about in political debate, especially morally charged debates. And I mean, I think we have a tendency to treat numbers as a kind of brute fact. And so when numbers get tossed around, we tend to privilege them over more mushy things like, say, values. I think the big lesson of the presentations we've heard so far, some remarkably insightful and incisive presentations on the evidence, is that numbers never speak for themselves. Numbers have to be scrutinized. We have to pay very careful attention to how accurate our estimates are. And in academia, and one hopes in public life more generally, we should always be very careful in estimating the uncertainty that attends to our predictions. And so it's frustrating, I think, certainly for me as a scholar, but I think for all of us who've presented and will present, when we see professionals tossing around numbers as if they're obvious facts when clearly they're not. And I think that's some latent frustration in our communities about the way some of these figures get bandied about. Now, what I want to talk about in the time I have is this recap data that's essential to your staff's, the board staff's cost estimates, the background behind the facility condition indices and the price, the costs associated with those. It's behind the $3.2 million figure that's been tossed about as the alleged cost savings for closing Prince Philip. Now, RECAP, as I'm sure you know, is a software package. It's the Renewal Capital Asset Planning process. It's designed and supported by Altus Capital Planning. It's a big company, and actually they do very good work. They're a good software company. The ministry contracts with Altus to provide lifespan and replacement cost estimates across the full range of facilities across the province. Now, RECAP is a very useful tool. For setting long-term budget priorities, it's ideal. Scheduling inspections across a wide range of facilities of varying ages and uses. This is exactly the sort of data you need. What I want to talk about are the problems that come when you try to make detailed, short-term cost estimates of specific facilities using this software tool. The problem here is that each cost estimate in a RECAP data set comes with a measure of uncertainty. Now, for many items, that uncertainty is going to be very modest. I mean, we have a very good idea about what influences the lifespan of light bulbs. But there's considerable uncertainty about other factors, and we've heard about some of the very strange results of these sorts of estimates. You end up replacing things that don't need replacing or that simply don't exist in the facility. Now, I say RECAP is still useful. When you take all of that kind of uncertainty over decades and across many facilities, things average out. and you get useful long-term estimates. That statistical effect is lost, though, when we focus in and offer costs in the short term for specific facilities. And again, we've seen a lot of numbers so far, and you've heard a lot of numbers from the staff. So I want to dwell on this. I'm a philosopher, so I want to kind of explain this idea. And those of you with a background in statistics will probably remember some relevant terms here, like asymptotic consistency and central limit theorems. But you don't need any of that technical knowledge to understand the core intuition. I give you a coin. You flip it 10 times. Now, I insist the coin is fair, but you get 8 heads and 2 tails. Am I lying? And the temptation has to be, of course I'm lying, it's a biased coin. But you don't really know that. What you do know is that you have grounds for flipping that coin a whole bunch more times. Now, the problem with making short-term cost estimates of single facilities with recap data is it's the equivalent of betting on that coin. You're betting on it being fair or biased after only a few flips. What you should be doing with the recap data is what, frankly, Altus recommends you do with it, which is to trigger detailed inspections of flagged facilities, and then you sort out what the actual costs are going to be. Now, the staff hasn't done that, and I don't think that's entirely unreasonable, because you might complain that, look, inspections are expensive. But I think it's far more expensive to bet against a biased coin that you think is fair when there's a lot of money and communities at stake. And to be clear, the staff here is proposing that you take a lot of bets. So they want you, the trustees, to bet on the alleged cost savings of closing Prince Philip using this statistical data in just the way I've described, the problematic way we've seen. They want you to bet on favorable market returns from selling that school. They want you to bet on the goodwill of the ministry in dishing out funds if we have this perverse show of good faith of sacrificing one of our schools first. So we have a business plan. What about the rising costs of school busing, which were cited in the recent Drummond report? Well, under the staff plan, increased busing costs will likely be $1 million or more over the next decade. And that's just by their kind of, frankly, very casual back-of-the-envelope estimate. They want you to bet that those costs will be guaranteed by the province out of a separate budget and continue to be so, as they are now. What about the broader harm to local environments from all that busing? Some of the health consequences that my friend and colleague Antonio Paez has mentioned. What about the civic health of our communities when we don't have these anchor institutions? What about the specter of school bus user fees suggested in the Drummond report? Well, the staff is asking you to bet that these subtle but very real costs are going to just be accepted by voters without protest. And they want you to make all of these gambles on the statistical equivalent of a few coin tosses. And it's not as if the staff is in the dark here. I mean, you've heard what they've heard. And for some reason, that I find intensely frustrating, the staff ignores the considerable expertise that you've already heard and will hear tonight, the considerable local knowledge we have, and then they keep touting these speculative figures as if they're hard facts. Now, I suppose you might complain that the board shouldn't be singled out here because, well, look, frankly, this is the way we've always done things. Everyone uses the recap data. We're not the only ones using it this way. There are other boards out there doing this. They're bad numbers, sure. They're the only numbers we've got. Now, I think there are 3 things to note by way of response here. It's no excuse for bad behavior to point out that you've always done it that way or that other people are doing the same thing. I mean, you wouldn't take that excuse from your kids. I know I wouldn't. I'd invite you to try it with a speeding ticket. You know, officer, everyone else is speeding. Besides, I've always driven this fast. Good luck. Second, as we've seen over and over in the presentation so far, it just isn't true that any number is better than no number. Bad numbers lead to costly gambles, wrong-headed policies. The cost of getting good numbers is money well spent. And third, and I think most seriously, again, as we've seen here tonight and we'll keep seeing in subsequent presentations, our communities in West Hamilton have been significantly underfunded for several years. So if money needs to be saved, well, we've been pulling more than our share of the burden, and we've been doing it for some time now. Now let me conclude by returning to the Drummond report, because it mentioned not just the rising cost of busing, but it also mentions the supposed underutilization of facilities as a significant cost concern. I want to talk about this mantra of 100% utilization that we keep hearing, because it is a great soundbite, right? How could anyone disagree with efficient allocation of resources? But like all sound bites, it's absurdly simplistic when we look at the complexity of the problem. The fact is that the board itself views utilization rates for these older schools in the mid to high 80s as pretty much ideal. More than that, you need portables, and those aren't favorable to modern learning objectives. So I think we have to push past this obsession with amalgamating and consolidating, even while we're simultaneously embracing, maybe even encouraging suburban sprawl. That status quo is not going to work for the emerging economic and environmental realities of our 21st century cities. And I believe that many of our urban communities in Hamilton are models for that future. And so I think we should look to that future and take the high road and not gamble away our children's communities for a quick buck. We need these schools. Thanks for your time.
Any questions for clarification? Trustee Johnstone.
I guess I respect the comments coming from you that that your schools have been certainly underfunded for various reasons. I hope, though, that you are aware that that has been experienced across the board and not just in the Dalewood area.
Certainly, certainly. And look, I don't want this to seem as though this is some sort of, convergence of NIMBYisms here. Like, look, two neighborhoods that happen to agree. Like, we want a school and we don't want their kids in ours. No, of course, I don't think anyone denies it. Look, these are hard times. Boards have to make hard decisions. And all these schools are faced with these pressures. But the fact is, as we've heard, we've done pretty well with these, I guess, non-modern learning methods with facilities that, yes, of course are underfunded, but we're doing all right. We're doing very, very well. And if it ain't broke, I just don't see the point in fixing it when we've heard that, in fact, the cheaper option is the status quo. It seems to me.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Trustee Turkstrand?
Thank you very much. The question actually isn't for you. Again, it's for staff, because it's being alluded to that we look at the recap data, which we of course do, and then we have to validate that in terms of real expense. So the 3.2 million that you're talking about. So my question is really to staff about the validation process of the recap data that we use for our long-term capital planning and whatnot. So I want to know if we do have an itemized list of what's real and what's not real in terms of renewal.
I want to make sure staff understands the question. Ken is giving me a nod. Thank you.
Thank you.
Student Trustee Shen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so if indeed the current method is not the best method and there's a chance for 8 tails and 2 heads, then the chance is still less than if we have 5 tails and 5 heads. So what I'm saying is, what is the alternative that will give us a better outcome other than...
Well, so the analogy in this example of flipping the coin more is really getting those on-site inspections. And that's what Altus is one of the key elements that Altus cites in the supporting material for this package and for another package they've just developed for municipal expenditures. Again, these are really good packages if you're a dorky software type, and I kind of am. Yeah, that's the solution, right? So it's not, you don't sort of say, 8 heads, 2 tails. Oh no, I can't say anything. Of course you can say something. I say, wait a minute, that's worth looking at. And then we go and look at it. The temptation, I think, though, is to think, well, looking at it then costs money. We need inspections. So why don't we just go with the recap data? And that's the temptation you have to resist as a planner, as an administrator, as a staff analyst. And I fear that maybe that temptation in this case has carried the day. We want to know, if we want that data on what really needs fixing, you've got to get on the ground. And this is sort of Mike Holmes stuff, right? It really, it really should be the norm, I think, in local, municipal expenditures and the like. It seems to me.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for clarification? Then I thank the speaker
Thanks
for
very much.
coming